Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Upside Swings NBA Draft Podcast, the podcast with the highest ceiling. I'm your host, Bryce Hendricks, joined always by the great Cooper Klein and the wonderful Stone Hansen. And today we're here to talk about, for the podcast listeners, we're here to talk about a group of four interesting wings. For the YouTube watchers, we are starting with the enigmatic Carter Bryant. But before we get too into Carter and these other various interesting wings. Coop, Stone, my friends, how you guys doing?
Ridiculously tired, per usual, but I'm very stoked to talk about this group. I have been for a while, but I need a much needed break of just working nonstop. So this is a welcomed little bit of a distraction for me.
Yeah, it's been a chaotic weekend, chaotic week just in general. So very excited to hop in and talk about my favorite thing. This is as much as I want to think about, I value bigs more now, all this stuff. In my heart of hearts, I'm still a guy who loves forwards. Every single forward that comes on my screen, I want to put him lotto. And at the end of the day, I just love talking about him. So let's hop right in to Carter Bryant.
Absolutely. Carter Bryant measured at the combine at 6'6.5" without shoes. So, pretty close to a real 6'8" in shoes. 8'10" standing reach with a 6'11" and 3/4 wingspan. So he is a pretty, he'd be a good sized 3 and kind of an average to maybe slightly undersized 4, depending on how we're really defining that positionally right now. But he's a pretty big dude, and there's some obvious physical comps that people bring up, guys like OG Anunoby and some other kind of big, strong wing defenders. And Carter Bryant definitely looks the part this season as a freshman at Arizona. Where he was, he's a November 26, 2005 birthday, so he's 19. He will turn 20 about a month and a half into his rookie season. His rookie season will be his age 20 season. For kind of a comparison, he's a whole year older than Cooper Flagg and Noah Songe. So he is, I don't want to say he's like an old freshman, but he's definitely not a young freshman. This is more or less he's kind of a little bit older than the general aging curve here. But as a freshman, he averaged 6.5 points, 4.1 rebounds, 1.0 assists, 0.9 steals, and 1 block on 46, 37.1, 69.5 shooting splits. If you're saying, man, those numbers sound really weird for a one-and-done guy, it gets weirder. In 37 games this year, he only started 5 of them, and he played only 19.3 minutes per game. In terms of total minutes, he only played 48% of Arizona's minutes. That is really, really low. This is maybe the highest I've ever seen a quote-unquote pre-draft guy discussed, because the stats here suggest pre-draft. They don't suggest someone who is generally talked about as a lottery guy. This is the type of guy where in drafts past, I feel like Coop and I would be out here on a ledge pounding a drum. Hey, this guy should go way higher than he's talked about. And now we're like, top 10? I mean, okay. And so there's some other, stats that are kind of interesting that have buoyed this, obviously. A 7.5 box plus minus, 113.9 offensive rating, both pretty good numbers. The 16% usage is maybe the biggest question on his stat profile, but he did have a 57.1% effective field goal rate to a 59.3% true shooting. Grabbed 5.3% of offensive rebounds and 17.8 defensive rebound rate. Only an 8.3 assist rate and a fairly high 18.5 turnover rate. But the really staggering numbers: 5.8% block rate, 2.8% steal rate, and 17 dunks this year. 33.5 free throw rate. Shot 76.7% on only 43 total close twos, 32.1% on 28 long twos. Only took 59 total free throws. Did shoot well from the three-point line, 39 for 105 total for 37.1%. Took about 8.4 per 100. The place to start here is obvious. The whole, not the whole, but the big sell here is the defense. This is a guy who is going to be a really high level defensive player in the minds of many. So let's start there. Coop, how'd you feel, in watching about Carter Bryant's defense?
This is a guy 6'8", pretty good mover, and just really smart for a freshman. I think he's pretty tough. I do worry about some of the motor stuff and some of the hip flippability stuff. I wouldn't say he has a low motor at all, but these kind of like really locked down high end defenders, like the guy he's gotten comps to, like OG. One of their special sauces is the fact that they have absurdly high motors. Off the ball, they are like some of the best screen navigators you'll ever see because they fight through everything and they read you and they beat you here. And I think he's just solid. I think that the motor is good, and for a freshman, I think he's just an incredible just reader of the floor. He's a real bother at the point of attack. I think he's just really good at. I wouldn't say he's particularly switchy, but he can bother just about everyone. My biggest worry with him, he can make good low man rotations. He plays all right at the nail. He can just kind of be everywhere, play every kind of role because he's 6'8", decently athletic, insanely long arms. I just worry that his closeouts can be kind of rough. He'll close out too hard, and then he'll just get beat by a guy who's not a particularly good ball handler and get downhill. And he's pretty good at fighting back into plays, but I wouldn't say he's a particularly strong recovery defender. I think for a freshman, he is like very good, but I wouldn't say he's like absurdly exceptional in any of these super strong areas. I think the biggest thing is just his one-on-one defense, his pretty solid screen nav for a guy who's that big. I think he has really good just micro skills on the defensive end. He knows how to, throw his arm around the big to be able to scoot through a screen. He has really good footwork. He sits down in a stance really well. He's pretty good at anticipating things, but he's also good at reading how things are going. He has a really good mixture of the two. He's not super reliant on pre-reading or on, processing and reacting to things in the moment. Um, but I do worry that he's not like an OG level guy because he's not outlier special in a bunch of these ways. He's just very good, which is still great. I really like that from a freshman age prospect. But there are definitely some nits to pick with the defense. Stone, I know you're a bigger fan than I am here.
I would maybe say this is the best perimeter defensive prospect I've ever evaluated, outside of maybe Cooper Flagg and that ilk of number one type players we've talked about. But in terms of anyone that's not like a top 3 pick in the past drafts, I would say Carter Bryant is probably the best perimeter defender I've ever scouted. And I think it comes down to I think he's like just an insane walk down defender, great hands on the perimeter. He's big enough and strong enough and long enough in recovery to play the low man role. He's quick enough to guard guards on the perimeter, strong enough to guard bigger forwards. This to me is like a can't miss elite defensive prospect. Like I have no concern. I'm not even sure I question whether or not at some point in his career he'll make all defensive teams. Like I think it might just be like a given that at some point Carter Bryant is going to be an all defensive player. Like that is the level of confidence I have in his defense and how elite I think it is. I would say his motor. Now there is context, right? Like we already talked about. He played pretty minimal minutes offensively. He had extremely low usage. But from the time that he did play, like I think it's fair to say that his motor's on par with someone like Cooper Flagg. Like I think the motor is that level. It's I'm getting a lot of reactionary faces here, but that is how I believe in Carter Bryant as a defender. Like I think he reads opposing offenses extremely well. We talk about feel all the time as ball handlers. Well, that can also be applied to defensively, and I think the feel that Carter Bryant possesses defensively is elite. Now, the execution needs a little bit of reining in, but I think it's fairly low-hanging fruit. I think the biggest thing, as Cooper said, is he's I think the motor runs so hot that he's over aggressive at times and commits some dumb fouls, and it leads to over aggressive closeouts. But I think both those things are fairly fixable. Like those are not things that, unlike something like slow hips or bad foot placement or things you question whether a prospect will ever be able to overcome. Uh, I think at his age, if you're over aggressive on closeouts, I have pretty strong confidence that it's going to iron out. Um, he extends fully for rebounds. He can stay in the air for a really long time. So when he's going up for a board and he jumps too early, like it's not really that big of an issue because he stays in the air for so long. I think that he's long and strong and quick enough off his feet to really execute a low man roll super well. But he's moldable and flexible in a way that whatever team gets him can ask him to play a different role defensively, like almost any night besides like a primary rim protector, and feel really confident about the level of production that they'll be getting from that. There's just really no questions I have regarding how good Carter Bryant's going to be defensively. I don't get this excited. You guys are typically the ones that get really excited about defense for forwards. The roles are switching today. I'm extremely excited about just talking about what Carter Bryant does defensively and what he could be. And I think all the questions to me lie on the other end. I don't have very many questions at all regarding his defense at the next level.
This is where we play the Meryl Streep scene from the 2008 masterpiece Doubt, where she says, "I have much doubt," because that's the stupidest joke I've ever made. But that's I fall. I like Carter Bryant a lot defensively, but I do have doubt. I have questions. So there's a couple things. I'm just going to say these two things I wrote, and I'll kind of build my analysis from there. For a defense-only prospect, I wish I believed an aspect of his defense was truly elite. I think he is solid at a lot of things, and I think the closeouts. I understand where Coop is coming from, but I think the closeouts are actually the closest thing he has to elite, because even though they're over-aggressive, he can just cover that ground so quick. And I'd rather. And we're going to compare, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but like when we compare him to someone like a Nique Clifford, like Nique Clifford takes very tentative closeout steps where he wants to contest late. I like that Carter's trying to close space aggressively, and I think he does push out of his closeouts fairly well when he can stop himself before getting all the way there. And he also blocks a shit ton of jump shots. So, I do think that's the closest. But I'm not sure anything is at that, that elite threshold right now. He doesn't have like elite recognition or reaction time away from the ball. His screen nav is okay, but not elite. He's good at containing on the ball, but he's not like an impose his will defender. Like, he's going to get the OG Anunoby comps. When OG Anunoby guards on the ball, and even if you go back and watch it Indiana at time, and OG had really stiff hips at Indiana, that's something he's fixed in time. So I'm not saying that like defense can improve in similar ways to offense. In fact, I think defense often improves more when guys come to the league than people realize. But because it's not a hard skill, it you don't notice it. But the truth is, there's way more emphasis put on it. Anyways. But, OG would get up on the ball, and he would really be trying to impose his will and make ball handlers uncomfortable. While I like Carter Bryant as a perimeter defender, he is not a make ball handlers uncomfortable guy. He is a trust my length to contest late. I'm just trying to contain him on the ball. And then every once in a while, he'd maybe push up a little bit and start to impose his will some. But it's just not consistent. And I don't think he maximizes his physical tools in any sense. Like, he is a really good vertical athlete. He's really long, and he has very good strength, especially upper body strength. But I don't think he maximizes any of that right now. I think with some added strength, upside is like a really good on-ball defender, like an OG Anunoby, with some solid off-ball, stuff. I don't think he's ever going to be like he's very different from like a Tari Eason. Like Tari was like a roamer, and he was someone who is at his best either at the nail or as a low man, where he has time to make reads and be explosive towards the ball as a playmaker in those senses. That's not Carter Bryant. Carter Bryant is very conservative defensively, which is why it's partially so impressive that he had a 5.8 block rate and a 2.8 steal rate. Like that is just a testament that he is so physically gifted and he's so smart. And I think he has a really good right hand when it comes to blocking shots. Just to be honest, like the truth is, I say he doesn't maximize his physical tools. That's wrong in the sense that he does maximize his upper body strength, in that he will just rip the ball from people sometimes. And if someone tries to shoot a shot over him, and he's right there, he will smother it with one hand and just like pull it down. Some of his block shots are really, really impressive. I think that the sell eventually is a stopper. He sticks with guys pretty well, and again, that upper body strength it's really beneficial towards like guarding on the ball. Lower body strength is useful for especially like guarding post guys, but upper body strength is really important for being able to absorb contact as guys try to get through you immediately. It's really good for again, kind of forcing guys where you want them to go, and it's good for being able to handle guys trying to run through your arm, especially the more you think of how much of the NBA has guys like doing their off-arm swipe. Well, if you try to off-arm swipe someone and they're strong enough they can just hold through it, all of a sudden you're not going to get away with that, right? I like that he's intelligent. He's really smart. He was able to do different things at Arizona. I don't think he's a crazy like natural feel guy, but I think he is really like this is I don't have great words to explain this, but I think he's a very studious guy. And he's the type of guy that's like, in terms of executing schemes, he's great. And he's great at knowing his personnel. Who should he close out hard on and take space from? Who should he close out short on? Like all that type of stuff is great. He's not as great at kind of like the just fly around and make plays. And this goes back to EYBL. He's not as great at that kind of stuff. And that's why, again, like I've seen Tari Easton comparisons for him. He's not that kind of defender. He is, I really do think, like the OG Anunoby comp is fair defensively in that is the type of defender he will be, in my opinion, where he is good enough away from the ball to make some low man rotations, to make some digs at the nail. But what he's really out there to do is guard your other team's best player. I think another potential defensive comp is like pre-Kawhi Raptors Pascal Siakam, where it's just like he's not like a crazy playmaker, but you'll sick him on the other team's best guy, and he's going to do a pretty damn good job. Now, the truth is, the thing that limits OG Anunoby and a Pascal Siakam and guys like that at times is that their screen nav is not great. Like, and at a certain point, if you have to switch, then your one-on-one defensive ability can be kind of muted at times. And that's why this is not I wouldn't say Carter Bryant is the best defensive prospect I've scouted, because this is not the type of defense I value the most in terms of perimeter defense. I want guys who are gonna make plays more than anything else, because who can still hold up one-on-one, but it's a lot harder to out scheme guys who just make plays. Like an Alex Caruso. Like, yeah, he's a great one-on-one defender, but also like if you put him as just the roamer to go make plays, he's gonna do that. And that's a lot harder thing to scheme out. Carter Bryant's defense is the type of thing that I could see being schemed out of its true effectiveness. It's why OG Anunoby will never be the guy that drives the team to being the best defense in the league. But, other than bigs, like supercharged, playmaking defenders can kind of raise your defensive ceiling, or at least your defensive floor, because they will always make plays no matter what the scheme is. Carter Bryant is more of a ceiling raising defender. Hey, when it's championship winning time and you just need to make sure you have all 5 guys on the floor can guard, and you want to try your best to at least put this person on the Luka or the LeBron and say, make their life hell until we have to switch. He can do that stuff great. And he's not going to be bad away from the ball. But I don't think he has like preternatural tools or timing. I think the proprioception is pretty bad. I don't think he sees or understands space around him very well at all. That goes on both ends. But still, like, he's a 6'8", super strong wing who moves his feet well and is super smart. Like, I do see where you're coming from, Stone. I think there's absolutely worlds where he is a playoff level defender. Uh, you know, and he could even be an all defense guy in the way like a Herb Jones has been an all defense guy. They're kind of different, but similar in that Herb Jones has morphed himself into the one-on-one stopper guy, the get through screens guy, while also being a productive playmaker. Carter's defensive production just gives you a lot of hope too. So I just talked for a long time. I understand that, and I kind of come across as he's really, really good defensively, and I don't want that to get twisted. But I'm not sure he's like a sure thing will be a top 5 perimeter defender in the NBA. And even if he does get to that level, he's still not, in my opinion, the most valuable type of defender. So, Stone, I'll let you respond to that, and then you can kind of wrap up your feelings on Bryant defensively as well before we move to the other end of the ball.
I don't disagree with your evaluation of defense. I came away thinking that Carter does provide that playmaking level of defense from the film that I watched, where I think that the way I would say that is important distinction, I guess, is I agree that he's not making elite reads like off the ball for making plays away from the ball, like getting into passing lanes and things like that are not in his vicinity. But I think he's really good at seeing things before they happen when it pertains to the ball and his man. And when it pertains to the ball and his man, I think he's ahead of the game and knows what's going to happen with those two things. And because of that, he can break up a lot of plays, and he can get into passing lanes if it's regarding his man and the ball. He's not like the type of defender. It's difficult to explain. He's not the type of the defender that's flying around everywhere, but he is the type of the defender where he can still do that stuff within smaller vicinities, I guess is the best way to put it. And I think that there's still equity there to be a guy that is a lockdown guy, but also making plays at the point of attack if he's put in that role. Breaking up off of like a 2-man game between the wing and the big. Like there's things that he can break up, even if that's not his primary calling card. And I would say that, like, I think the ground coverage is just ridiculous. So even if those things aren't there right now, I think that he has all the tools to be that type of player at his age too. Not that he's super young, but 19, 20-year-old season, like there's definitely room for improvement still. And I think that with the tools that he has and what he has shown to me, at least in being that smaller vicinity playmaker defensively, I think there's room for that to grow. Like the ground coverage is ridiculous. The strength is ridiculous. And if that means bumping a guy to go to the ball at the same time, he's probably going to win almost every time because he's so much stronger. If they're both going for the ball at the same time, like I think there's a lot of tools there to really make him the kind of defender that you want him to be, and he's already shown that he is, in my opinion, like this lockdown defender. But I don't know. I haven't had this level of confidence on a perimeter defender in a long time, so maybe I'm overexcited about it, but I do feel really confident that no matter what the situation is, where he lands, that is, like I think he's going to be a plus defender. And in that level of confidence, and we won't get to the offense yet, but that level of confidence in his defense, to me, makes the bar much lower offensively for what he has to meet to be a productive NBA player.
Coop, I know you have some stuff to say, and Stone, I don't want to throw you on the spot here, but I just want to throw a couple names out there at you, and I do kind of want to confirm, like, you're more in on Carter Bryant defensively than you were these guys. Steph Castle,
Yes.
Devin Carter.
Sorry, do you want me to like explain?
No, you don't. You don't have to.
Okay.
No. If you have one you want to explain on, you can, but you don't have to.
Devin Carter, yes.
Okay.
Because I think he's much stronger too.
He's bigger. That one is absolutely fair. What about Ahmed and Ausar Thompson?
It's more difficult for me because they're such one-of-one athletes. I was lower on Asar's defense than Amen. If you talk about them now, like I view Asar as a really great defender in his own right. As prospects, I would say not Amen, and maybe close to the same tier of Asar as prospects.
Fair enough. Yeah. No, I think so far I've been at least close to with you, but I definitely was higher on Amen, but I was also insanely high on Amen in general.
No, I said Amen. Yeah, Amen was a better defender.
And I'm with you on that.
Yeah.
What about like Atari Eason, who I know you were a little lower on than
I was a little lower on. I don't think that it's harder because they're different kinds of defenders, but I didn't feel as confident in Tari's. I think it is harder to be as confident in those sort of roaming playmaking defenders than it is to be for a lockdown type of defender. Like, I think that the confidence level as prospects, it's harder to be as big on that. But I would say I would have favored Carter, or I do favor Carter prospect-wise to Eason defensively.
Okay. I got two more for you. This is someone who we were really high on as a group, I believe, but had a similar productivity level freshman season. Jordan Walsh.
Carter Bryant, because I didn't think that Walsh was the kind of. I think Walsh had more to prove to be a lockdown defender than what Carter Bryant currently is.
Fair enough. All right, last one. Jeremy Sohan.
Very different defenders. Very, very different defenders. So it's almost apples to oranges here. I love super processors. Everybody knows this. And I don't think if Bryant had Sohan's processing, that would be one of one. I'll go Carter Bryant here because I think the lockdown defense is just like it's just like when it's this level of elite in comparison to an elite team or scheme defender, an elite playmaking defender, it's just an easier level of. It's easier to be more confident in that. I feel like when there's this level of proven lockdown guy than those guys who are proven in their own right, but it's harder to project that on an NBA team than I feel like being a lockdown perimeter defender is.
That's absolutely. There is something to be said for the fact that Bryant is more scheme independent in that I think he can probably switch 1 through 4 and probably even guard some fives fine. He's gonna execute the basic low man stuff and the basic nail stuff, even if I don't think he's superlative at either. Though I do think there's a world where maybe underrating him as a low man. Like, his shot blocking ability is real. He can really block shots. He's just not. I think his timing is really bad. I think he's really bad at playing too. Like, there is no world where he's like a small ball 5 or anything like that. But
I could really quickly. I want to elaborate that the ground coverage is elite when we're talking about horizontal, but also vertically. Like, he's elite ground coverage, like in all planes of that you can possibly be. Like, the ground coverage just gets sucked up extremely quickly. That is reminiscent of a lot of big man like rim protectors, but obviously he's doing it more on the perimeter. But um, I don't think we really see that level of ground coverage and space being sucked up by perimeter defenders all that often.
No, that all that is fair, and I do think it's a worthwhile point that these lockdown perimeter guys generally more scheme independent. Tari Eason to be maximized has to play in the right scheme defensively. Now Tari's also a pretty damn good fucking on ball defender too. So don't get me wrong, but maybe a better example is like Matisse Thybulle, right? Like that's a guy who's very scheme dependent. Like even though I still think he's almost underrated as a defender now because he's been toiling away on teams that had no use for him. But this is the type of defense that's more scheme independent. Though I don't think he's going to be able to like get through screens like at a high level at any point. But anyways, Coop, will you wrap up with your thoughts on the defense? It's been a long time since we've heard your voice.
No, that was a really fun conversation. I hearing Stone say that he thinks Bryant's motor is on flag level, spicy, and I'm here for the spice. I don't care that I disagree. I'm here for the spicy take. So the big thing is that Bryce, you and I both talked about. There's a lot of stuff that's good. There's less stuff that I'm fully in on being elite right this moment. But I do think that the fact that there is so much good that he is so scheme independent, and he can play different roles. And Stone, you were talking. I think that was one of your big points was just the on-ball defense plus being good enough at all this other stuff that he's so much more valuable because of that, right? Like his actual value to an NBA team is so much higher no matter where he's drafted than just the raw collection of his skills in a vacuum, right? My one worry is that like to me the thing that makes a guy like OG so special is that he is truly outlier strong to the point where all the things that you would normally think of as like strong guy drawbacks just don't exist because he'll just muscle through it. Oh, his screen nav is bad. Now his motor's too good, and he'll actually just shove the big man out of the way because he's so much bigger. And his low man rotations are almost perfect for a guy of that size. And I do think some of that's developed. Him as a younger guy in Toronto, he was not making low man rotations like that. He wasn't that strong. That's part of an NBA strength and development program. But I do think that there's worlds where that could happen for Bryant. And the motor is at the requisite level. I don't think it's Tari or Amin, like outlier. I don't think it's even like flag level, where it's like truly like the bankable skill and like the center of his prospectum. But I think that there's worlds where the rest of that stuff just gets him on the floor, and then the rest of it all develops, and he becomes, a full-time just like help guy at the nail, and his hands are so good and he's so long. There's so many different paths he can take developmentally on defense. Because as we kind of transition here over to the offense, he can shoot the ball well enough to stick on the floor, right? I don't know how much else there is. There's some funk. You want to talk about like he can make some cool passes, but he hits his shots. And at the end of the day, if you're going to be a hyper versatile, good on ball defender at his size who doesn't give up a ton on the defensive boards because his motor's so good, he's crashing the glass. He's making sure that you're cleaning up, other teams' offensive possessions. And he's just smart, and he plays hard, and he makes the right play. And offensively, I think his biggest thing, other than the shot, is just that he will do the gritty shit. He will set out there. He'll get out there. He'll set a screen. He's moving into the space properly. He's moving around on the perimeter. He's running in transition. He's getting to his spot where they tell him to run in transition, and he has no pride about it. And I think that's the big thing. He just gets out there and he does what the team needs him to do to win. And I think that's kind of a theme also on the defensive end. I think that's what makes him so interesting. He does all this stuff that's just so valuable. And even if he's not the best at it as a freshman, it's still just so special that he's already doing it to such a high level. And offensively, he's screening. He can make some passes if he gets, two guys on the ball. There's some flashes of interesting stuff, but none of it is like dribble driving and making a kick out. He's not the kind of guy who you're Jaden McDanielsing him, where you bring him in and then you spend 2 summer leagues developing him into like a tertiary on-ball ball handler. I think the most he's going to do is take a 1-2 dribble pull up. And that's fine because he can also take a 1-2 dribble and then pass out because he can make the right play. He's not an insane offensive processor, but he's solid. I think that he's just super limited offensively, but the fact that he's gritty and he can shoot is enough for NBA teams to be like, well, you can get on the floor and your defense is really going to develop to this kind of all defensive level that I think Stone sees.
I think the question here is, can he be passable as anything other than someone who's going to stand in the corner right now? I thought the decision making was actively pretty bad, to be honest. He can't dribble like at all. Like, it's not even worth like really spending time on in terms of his development, I don't think. He doesn't have like a blinding first step. I think the sell first and foremost is the jumper. 66th percentile in catch and shoot, 97 attempts with a 54.1% effective field goal rate this year. 87th percentile on dribble J's on 21 attempts, 52.4% effective field goal rate. I do think that the dribble J's, I think it's a little bit overstated in terms of that effectiveness. They were all wide open, one dribble pull-ups in the mid-range pretty much. That's just kind of what it is. The form is solid. There's a pretty huge valgus in the knees right now. Shooting elbow starts flared out a little bit, which is not great. But the extension is really good. The release super high. And there's not like a ton of moving parts. We'll talk about Drake Powell later in the pod for those listening. Stone and I already talked about it yesterday. But, he has like that really strong hitch in the jumper. Like, there's none of that with Bryant, right? Like, it looks smooth enough. He always, kind of like, does this hop drop into his jumper where he's not really stepping in left right a ton to get his rhythm down. He's trying to hop, and then as he's catching the ball, he's dropping his hips to raise into it, which is fine, but it almost kind of looks like someone who's doing like a shooting workout rather than like how you would teach guys to actually shoot in games, because you want their rhythm to be more natural. And he really has to kind of come about that rhythm artificially sometimes. The most important thing, he looks really good making shots from the corner. If he's catching that thing in the corner, man, it looks great. The movement stuff looks really bad. In EYBL, for what it's worth, 84th percentile on 38 catch and shoot shots with a 55.3% effective field goal rate. And this is where I think what the more true dribble jumper percentile looks like, using the 38th percentile on 55 dribble jumpers, about a 30.9% effective field goal rate. And he took, quite a few, in for that team he was playing with. I'm blanking on it. It wasn't team final. I get all my UIBL teams for these guys mixed up, but was he CP3 or Drake Powell was CP3. But anyways, he took quite a few off the dribble jumpers, and it never looked particularly comfortable. But he kind of had to take them because he couldn't really attack off the dribble and get to the rim. Like, that's not what his game was. Like, that's my biggest issue with him is I don't think he can like attack a closeout really at all, unless it's just like a completely awful defensive player he's attacked. Like, obviously, the truth is in the NBA they play 82 games. Like, there will be moments where he attacks a closeout on film, and you'll be like, look, he's attacking a closeout. But that's not what I don't think you can consistently effectively attack closeouts when teams actually care. The NBA plays way too many games, and teams don't care for about 40 out of the 82 games. They're one of the two teams is on autopilot. So, I like, he doesn't have a great first step. He doesn't vary his stride lengths. He doesn't have a great finishing bag. As a finisher, he's just not really super effective. He was 45.2% on layups in EYBL, which was in the 29th percentile. That's really bad. Again, EYBL is really high level competition, but like NBA players to shoot, below 50% on layups in EYBL is pretty rough. He doesn't really have moves to get to. This year he only attempted 13 total half court layups. For 53.8%. What I do like is I think he is a really solid cutter in like scramble situations. And that's something I should have said defensively. He is good in scramble situations. And I think that points to some just kind of natural intelligence. And I don't want to say natural. I'm sure he's worked really hard at it. But he's just kind of smart. Like he can just kind of make some smart guy plays here and there. Every once in a while, he'll crash for an offensive board that he really didn't think he would get. And then he gets it because he just read the angle right off the rim. Like that stuff is cool. But I don't think there's any way he's going to be more than a fifth guy offensively. Like that's just, if you can't dribble, you're not big enough to really be like a roll man. You can't post up. There's not really any path towards effective scoring for you. It is way harder to get on the floor than people realize. It's something Coop and I talked about a lot this year is that it is hard for role players at lower levels to go to the NBA and be role players still. A lot of role players in the NBA were stars at lower levels. Carter, I think, might shuck that because had he continued to play college basketball like someone like a Jay Crowder or something, like, yeah, maybe he would have eventually become a college star, right? He would have developed a bit of a post game and he would have been able to be a better 1-2 dribble pull up guy. And he could figure out how to rip a little bit better and get strong to his right hand and finish. Though he does want to go right left off too, which is, kind of tough. He's a fairly powerful lead, but like, listen, he's a good athlete who can make corner shots. Like, I'm not saying there's not a path towards him being an NBA player, but I think the path towards being more than a fifth guy is pretty low. And the truth is it's tough because being able to score efficiently is still one of the most important things in the NBA. The average true shooting in the NBA this year was like 56%. Like everyone in the NBA can at least kind of get buckets here and there. And I think people forget that sometimes because we're so focused on, oh, he's a role player. Like Aaron Nesmith can attack a closeout and go get a dunk, or he can get a putback dunk in a clutch moment from the free throw line. He can make movement threes, and he is the fourth or fifth offensive option on that team. Like that's what the NBA is, and that's my real worry with Bryant. Stone, as the foremost positive guy on Bryant, where are you at with his offense?
Not really anywhere different than you, to be honest. And I think something to really encapsulate that is, can you guess how many isolation plays Carter had Arizona this year?
0.
7.
Bryce got it.
Oh,
0 isolation plays whatsoever. Because he can't dribble. He cannot. He can't do anything with the ball. But I do think there's, as a fifth option, as a scorer, it's difficult. But there's ways to be utilized as a cog in the machine where if he's a serviceable three-point shooter, which I feel confident that he'll be serviceable. I don't know about super positive, 39, 40, 41%, but we talk about like a 36, 37% type guy. I think I feel decent about him reaching that threshold. As a guy that can be schemed out of slobs and blobs for dunks out of timeouts. I think he has that in his game. Like I think he's. I personally buy the motor really strongly, and I think that being a cleanup guy, like off of offensive rebounds, second chance opportunities, or being someone that operates out of the dunker spot, if he has a really good passing big, like those things are within his realm of being useful offensively. I don't think he's a good decision maker with the ball in his hands as a live dribble guy, but from a standstill, I think he found a lot of good reads when he has a little bit of time to see the play develop. Once the ball's in his hands, I feel like he makes a lot of the right decisions as a passer. Not that you're relying on Carter Bryant to make a lot of passes throughout the game, but I don't think he's going to hurt you too much as a passer. He's not going to play make anything. I do like the occasional end-to-end stuff once he got a rebound, and in transition he would scan the court a lot, and if there was a guy at the other end of the court, he'd make those lob Kevin Love passes and that was, something that was cool to see. Not that it's going to be a huge part of his game, but yeah, I don't have too much to disagree with offensively from a Bryce said or diverge, because he can't do anything with the ball, and when you can't do anything with the ball, you're reliant on everybody else, and there's, but to me, it's, I don't want to get to overall value yet, so I'll save it. But the offense doesn't have to be anything more than I just said for him to be really valuable, in my opinion. But I'll let Cooper take it.
This does remind me of a Brian J NBA tweet, um, where it was Terrence Arsenault is the basically just asking the question, how good can you be at basketball without having to dribble a basketball? And Arsenault kind of, he's had so many injuries and there's been so much bullshit, but I do feel like this is Carter Bryant to some degree. How good can a wing who can't dribble be on offense? I don't think he's the level of shooter or like passer that Arsenault is, but like what level can this kind of guy get to? So you're like praying that he's just like a guy who figures out relocation shooting and understands spacing a little better. Because my big worries with him are offensively, obviously the usage, 16 usage. I if you have a sub, if you're around 20, like if you're below 20 with your usage and you're not just like a play finishing big man, uh, I'm just immediately it's warning bells. There's nothing there. I'm tempted to fade you. The other thing for me is just that Arizona did not seem to want to play him, despite being. I mean, they were a decently talented roster. Uh, they were all right. I mean, what they were the 3 seed in the Big 12. It was kind of a weaker down Big 12 year, but I mean, they did not have the most ridiculous front court depth ever, and they didn't have very much shooting. They lost a lot of early games because they just didn't have shooting from most people other than Caleb Love, who is the world's streakiest shooter. And the fact that he was also just so timid offensively because it just seemed like Tommy Lloyd didn't have any degree of confidence in him. And that's not to say that I'm sitting here taking my scouting points from Tommy Lloyd, because he's not my favorite coach in the world. I thoroughly enjoyed watching the Cougs kick his ass. But it does feel like he would make the world's smallest mistake and immediately get pulled. Some of that is he's a freshman. But some of it is also that he was like too timid to take open shots and then he'd pass them up. Or he was too timid to take more than one dribble. Um, eh, Defensively, he didn't have the same problems. But I do worry at times that even stifles some of the like, wow, he's kind of young and he's really shooty, you know? Like that kind of upside where he's just like gritty and skilled enough at shooting and can read the floor well enough that gives him kind of a floor for NBA offense. And I do worry that there's just quite a few red flags in that area. If either of you guys have answers
Yeah,
for my flags, or if you agree
no,
with me.
for me, it's just it really comes down to, how much are you willing to bet on a guy with very little offensive upside and who's not a big man? Because the truth is, listen, NBA defense is still built around the center. It's just the truth. Perimeter defense is not near as valuable. That's why one of the all-time greatest travesties was Marcus Smart winning a random Defensive Player of the Year. Like, it's just perimeter defense ramps up in value in the playoffs, but it is really hard to be a defense-only wing and play a lot in the NBA. Like I said, even guys like Aaron Nesmith and OG Anunoby and even Herb Jones to an extent have developed into at least competent offensive players and were much better offensive players prior to entering the NBA. Including, again, I watched a lot of Carter Bryant's EYBL stuff, and he was not a particularly effective offensive player there either. He was pretty inefficient, and I don't know. I like Bryant a lot, and it's one of those things where, like, as I look at my board, it feels weird for me to have him a whole tier below someone like an Ace Bailey, because I really do think that if they both hit their median outcome, or like maybe slightly above median, I would way rather have Carter Bryant. But I also understand that Carter Bryant is way more likely to just not be in the league in a couple of years. So I'm still kind of toying with where I want to have him. I like the defense quite a bit. I'm not all the way where Stone is, but I have my questions as to just how good the offense can be. There's not as much funk that someone like a Tari Eason had, or someone like Jaden McDaniels had, or whatever. And most of these guys, like to actually stick in the NBA, have to be better offensive players than Carter Bryant. And the question is, can he become a good enough shooter to where he can make light movement shots and do that type of stuff? I think there's a possibility. He has a couple-year track record now of being a competent shooter, even though he's someone who clearly kind of picked it up late. Is the cutting valuable enough? And can he make decisions quick enough? I don't think he was a particularly good offensive decision maker at times because his only decision-making tree was, where's the next open guy? Because I can't hold the ball for too long. It's bad. I think he's smart. And all that stuff points to some upside there, but I'm just not sold on anything. So he's definitely a first rounder. He's borderline a guy I'd normally take lottery. I'm gonna guess he will end up lottery in this class for me. I could be wrong. We still have some guys to watch, but I'm just not locked in on being super high or super low on Carter Bryant. I wouldn't let him slip past 20 in basically any draft. I think that's where I'm at, but I wouldn't swing too high, especially because I actually think the right development system for him is one where he's not going to play a ton super early, or if he does, it's in a very limited role because he's not a guy who needs to explore the studio space or anything.
I'll go because I will let Stone cap it off with the high point. I think I'm slightly higher on him than you. I think that I really value forward defensive versatility. And I think as much as Bryant is super limited offensively, and there's a lot of red flags, there's too much that he does on defense consistently and to a degree that is this is pretty clearly translatable to the NBA, that I have a really hard time not being super in on him. I think there's a lot of forwards who look like they're supposed to be locked down, or they're going to be talked about as like they're locked down because they have long arms or they're athletic in a guy like Trey Johnson's case, but they just don't use it consistently or they don't know how to use it. And Bryant, there's none of those concerns. Bryant, you can have in your scheme as a stopper. You can have him at the nail. You can have him as a secondary stopper with who digs on drivers, more when they get deeper, or you can have him as the low man. You can have him in all these different roles. And the other thing is that we talked about this a little on the Penda episode, or a lot, honestly, but he is the kind of defender who you want to throw on the most, valuable, scariest offensive players in the league, right? This is the guy who you want to throw on Jason Tatum. This is a guy who you want to soak up minutes against a Luka, against a Cade. He's strong. He's got good positioning. He's got long arms. He's not going to get thrown around, but he's also not just so short that guys can go over him. And I think with some real strength and development time, with some more jumper work going in there, I think there's a real world Carter Bryant. He's one of the better lockdown defenders in the NBA. And the offensive upside keeps me from seeing him as a star, but he's a super comfortable high-end role player bet in a way that I do think that the world is, as much as I would like to sit here and be well, I want my role players to be stars before they come out, I think NIL is just kind of changing that unless they're super old. And Bryant is the kind of guy who philosophically a few years ago I would have loved. In a world where pre-drafting was more prevalent and younger guys came out earlier, I do think that this is a time where the NBA is finally getting it right. With a guy like Bryant, as scary as it is, I think if he came back next year, there's a real world where he's a top 8 lock, on not hypothetical value. If he just adds one or two things to his game, he's a very easy, just lottery lock. And he is this year, for some reason, to NBA teams, very obviously going to go top 14. But I'm very in on him. So I have him below Noah Asonge and above a guy like Trey Johnson, but they are in the same tier. In my late lottery like in that 10 to 15 or 16 range is where I'd want to take him. I wouldn't let him slip past 15 because at that point you're just letting special skills go. You need to be taking those swings on special skills.
And that's absolutely a fair point. I think you might have convinced me. I probably will have him lottery. Fuck it. I'll give a fuck. Anyways, let's move on to.
Wait.
Hands up. Hold on. I just assumed you already went, so because we've already recorded for fucking 55 minutes on a dude with a 12 usage in the freshman year of college. But.
Well, let's record for 10:75. No, but let me further convince you to move him even higher on what Cooper just said, because my whole philosophy that I've laid out is I want, at the crux of everything is I want the players that have the best chance to provide winning basketball. If Carter Bryant can be a lockdown defender on the best offensive engines in the NBA, that's pretty damn valuable to winning basketball. And that lowers the bar to just having to meet a passable threshold offensively. All Bryant has to do is be a good enough offensive player to keep himself on the court to be really valuable to me. That's all he has to do. I feel decently confident he can do that with the 3-point shooting, and by being just like a scrappy second chance guy as a fifth option. The bar is really low to be really valuable offensively, and I don't think Carter Bryant has a whole lot to go to meet that. I think I'm higher defensively on him. I think he's got a chance to be like a world breaker defender as a perimeter defender. But there's also an element of I just feel really confident because I feel so confident in the defense immediately being a real positive, and that threshold being so low that he has to reach offensively. But with both those things, being that confident in both, that means I'm really confident that he's just going to be a really valuable winning NBA player. So that to me, automatically just bumps him into my lottery. But there is an element of projection. This is unprecedented, right? Not very often we talk about 12 or 13% usage college players being super valuable in the NBA. But as the great Matt Powers said last year and coined the really good phrase that the NBA is built on outliers, that doesn't mean believe in everybody hitting their top percentile outcome as an outlier. It means choosing wisely. And this is in this class, this is my one outlier that I'm using, my outlier card. I'm going to use my outlier card on Carter Bryant, thinking that he's going to buck the unprecedented trend of guys not really being anything offensively in college to being super valuable in the NBA. And this is my unprecedented card that I'm playing. You're good at a geo-free card in Monopoly, but in the draft you have your unprecedented card, and I'm going to pull it out and play it for Carter Bryant. So I have him 8th on my board.
I'll move. I'll play mine on Queen, and then I'll move Bryant up, and you'll move Derek Queen up. Does that sound like a good swapsy? There?
I'll think about it.
Okay, that's good enough for me.
I don't even know who my crazy outlier guy. I mean, obviously I'm
It's
high on Con, but we're all high on Con. So, anyways,
thank you so much for listening to the Upside Swings NBA Draft Podcast here on YouTube. If you want to check out more of our stuff, you can follow us on Twitter. I refuse to call it X. You can check out our website, upsideswings.com. You can follow all of us on Twitter, subscribe here on YouTube for more content coming down the line. We'd love to hear from you. Let us know your thoughts on this pod and, our process in the comments. We'll see you next time. Thank you.
I don't think we really see that level of ground coverage and space being sucked up by perimeter defenders all that often.
Space being what? No, I'm kidding. No.